I pray the Lord my soul to take, that we won't lose faith and we won't lose faith. All we got is us, no one can take that away. So don't lose faith, it's gonna be okay. I pray the Lord my soul to take.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Just Listen to Yourself. This is the podcast where we take hot topics, hot button issues, and we discuss the talking points on those issues, and we draw those talking points all the way out to their logical conclusion. Because I feel like sometimes when we really look at the things we're saying, we're not saying the thing we think we are. Today is a special episode. It's a JLTY Plus. This is where I get to talk to somebody else. It's not just me giving you my opinions and working through issues. I actually get to bring another living, breathing human being into the conversation, and we get to talk about whatever is on my mind. And today I am thrilled to introduce a very special guest. We're taking it to church today, JLTY audience, as you know I like to do. And this guest, I have had the privilege of meeting him in the past and hearing him speak. He is a wonderful teacher, Glen Scrivener. He's the CEO of Speak Life, which is an evangelist organization, and he is also an ordained minister in the Church of England. He is an author. He is a poet, an incredible poet, which is one of the things that I first came to love about Glen. So, Glen, thank you for coming to the show today. I'm so thrilled to have you.
Oh, thank you. Don't set the bar too high, Kira. This is
Okay. I'm sorry.
feeling the pressure.
I know I tend to do that, but I feel like you will be able to meet the moment, as our politicians like to say here in America. Glen, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get going.
So I'm from Australia originally. I live on the south coast of the UK because I'm married to an Irish woman. So Emma is from Belfast and I'm from Sydney. And my wife thinks that the south coast of England is halfway. And I let her think that. And that's the secret to a good marriage. And yeah, so I am ordained in the Church of England, but my day job is to work for Speak Life, and that helps me to go around the place and talk on university campuses, college campuses, and speak to churches, but also to write things. And we try to make some noise on YouTube in particular. If there are 2.5 billion monthly users on YouTube, it seems like a pretty good place to be. So yeah, we've got our Speak Life channel there and podcasting and that sort of thing. So yeah, by any means possible, just shooting my mouth off about Jesus.
What is the mission of Speak Life?
Well, our strapline is love Jesus, share Jesus, because we kind of think that you speak about what you're passionate about. My Australian mother says, what grips your heart wags your tongue. That was sort of a saying that she grew up with. And I think it's just true. You will talk about the latest deal that you got on the gadget that you've just bought, or you will talk about the holiday, the vacation that you've just been on. You will, whatever is filling your heart will overflow in words of witness. And so actually, we're not really about making people busy as evangelists, because I think Christians get a bit burdened by that, and it can feel like an incredible millstone around your neck. Go and tell the world about Jesus. But if we tell you about Jesus in a way that is memorable and captures your imagination, then I think, when the heart is gripped, the tongue starts to move.
We could end it right there. You guys can see why I love Glen so much. But one of the things I should tell people that my friend Wendy Lamont, my best friend, really turned me on to the Speak Life mission and your podcast. And then we went to the Unbelievable conference in London. I guess it was 2018 now, or it was the year that Harry and Meghan got married, because that wedding was happening that weekend. Yeah, it was a crazy weekend.
It was BC, before COVID. So who knows?
Yeah, it was a whole different world. It really was.
Yeah.
It feels like a different lifetime ago. So I can't place everything exactly in the timeline we're in. And then it's I don't know what it's like where you're at, Glen, but here in America, as you can imagine, it's absolutely insane, the pace of change. So I can't keep anything straight right now.
I really can't either. And it's your fault because you're American and you are exporting your culture wars all around the world. And we're all fighting your culture wars for some reason.
Oh, well, we're finding that out, Glenn. You want to know why? There's a reason for that, actually.
Okay.
This may have made it overseas, this news, but as you know, Elon Musk is leading up the Doge department, the Department of Government Efficiency is looking into. Well, we found this program called US Aid, which
Oh yeah.
funds a lot of foreign influence programs, among other things. And one of the things we do is we import our culture wars to other
Yeah.
nations, and not the
US
good
forces, yeah.
kind.
No.
So like not the freedom kind, but the weird
Yeah.
kind that y'all are fighting right now. So yeah, there's the reason for it, Glenn. There is a reason
Yeah,
for it.
you are a cultural behemoth, and you have been exporting them via kind of legacy media and via Hollywood and that kind of thing. But
Hmm.
now it's at the speed of Twitter. So yeah, and it's funny. Last week, I made a joke with an American guest, Patrick Miller, who hosts the Truth Over Tribe podcast. And I made a joke about how I wish we could slap some tariffs on American culture wars, because if we're going to get into a trade war, can we at least slap some tariffs on the American culture war? And I made that joke. And then 3 days later, the podcast came out, and already it was out of date. Already, nobody's thinking about tariffs anymore because the USAID thing came out, and because Trump said he was going to buy up Gaza and make it into Mar-a-Lago or whatever. Like it's the pace of change is bewildering.
It's insane. I think it's going to get a little crazier, Glenn. If you want like pro tip coming up, I
Mm.
was just telling my husband this morning, I think we may be on track to overturn gay marriage this year, which is
Wow.
weird and crazy. Yeah, that would be a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on us.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels like all those sorts of moves are in one direction. And we always kind of imagine that the ratchet only goes in one direction. Even to think of the ratchet going in the opposite direction, it's almost difficult to conceive of. But yeah.
Isn't it? I'm so glad you said that. Let's just dig into this path, because I'm so glad you said that, because I do feel that it does um plug into what I've been talking about on this show, and just the way that things are changing. But this idea that it seems like we've all been conditioned to believe that there is only one way. This is what made me reach out to you to get you on the show, because you had Rob Dreher on your show and you were talking about sort of the coming chaos, the coming spiritual battle. We need to sort of break out of this materialist mindset and understand that there's other things going on, and they're going to come to a head pretty soon. And if somebody doesn't have the answers, it's going to be mass confusion. And so the idea that we've all been, even us Christians who really we think we're outside the box thinkers with Jesus, we all have this idea that it's just, well, I think Christians are guilty of this too, Western
Yeah.
Christians especially. We're settling into as well. We're settling into the culture. This is the way the culture's going. It can't be changed. Best we can do is just keep telling you about Jesus, but we really don't have any real kind of influence in this culture. And I
Yeah.
think what we're seeing, prompted by this political shift in America, which is really launching a vibe shift across the globe as I see it. I think what we're seeing is the idea that God is bigger than our assumptions about what way the ratchet turns.
Yeah, and imagine if God was on the throne rather than just historical inevitability. And we're constantly told historical inevitability is in charge. But, what if a personal God is in charge? And a personal God, as Proverbs tells us, can turn the course of a king's heart one way or another, just as a watercourse changes from one way to another. And I think we've bought into this historical inevitability thing for some Christian-ish reasons. you know, Martin Luther King Jr. preaches, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And, and he's actually picking up from another preacher of abolition 100 years earlier. Theodore Parker was the one who originated that phrase. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And so the abolitionists were preaching that, and they were preaching it with Bible in hand. They were preaching it with the prophets behind them who were saying that, justice will roll down like a mighty river, and that we will beat our swords into plowshares. And they had biblical hope, and therefore they believed in a moral universe, and they believed in an arc. But interestingly, I think the biblical arc is that things kind of go down and then up. They go sort of into death and then resurrection, cross, and then sort of Easter hope. Whereas I think there's a more worldly sense of progress that we have developed since the 19th century. And it's really interesting to think in the 19th century, there are some very non-Christian prophets of progress. You know, we're thinking about people like Marx, and we're thinking about Hegel, and they are looking at things like the moral shift that happened because of abolition, and they're thinking, well, things can get better. And they're looking at industrialization, and look, GDP is going up, and look, people are living longer. And so there's a material improvement in the world that is just kind of the result of industrialization. There's also a moral improvement in the world that actually came about through the Bible, but they tend to forget that.
All right.
And what then happens is you have these 19th century prophets of progress who just think, you're on the wrong side of history and we're on the right side of history. And what it leads to is the 20th century, which is the murder century. and, like, never forget that Chairman Mao presided over the Great Leap Forward. And because of his Marxist belief in progress, presided over the deaths of perhaps 40 million Chinese through starvation and through other atrocities. And we've got this real kind of tussle in the Western mind. Are we going to go with a biblical idea that there is a moral universe and it is going to work out in the end? And that's a quite Christian thing. But then there's this quite post-Christian idea that you're on the wrong side of history and it's all inevitable. And I think, yeah, even Christians can fall for the historical inevitability thing and forget that God is actually on the throne, and he might surprise us. In fact, it's kind of his MO. That's what he loves to do.
I love I love that. Yeah, he might surprise us, and of course I'm guilty of this same thing as a Christian, just not really, again, making God small, making God into someone like me, which I think
Mm.
is what we're seeing, especially in the West again. Um, People do with God, right? I'm making him like me. This is why we see, I mean, you're in the Church of England, and I know you guys have had your own battles with this, but this is why we see this cultural incursion into the church. We have a lot of people in church who want to make God like them.
Mm.
And it's really, when we think that God is anything like us, it feels dangerous. It feels dangerous.
Yeah.
And instead of us thinking we should be like him, I want to shift a little bit on that note, on that topic, because one of the things you have discussed on your podcast, Glenn, is this recent celebrity shift or influencer shift into Christianity. We're seeing sort of these big pillars in the institution fall, for lack of a better term. But Russell Brand and Jordan Peterson, and they're leading a lot of others, and you've had a lot to say about that. You've discussed it a lot, and you I love your approach. It's very careful, right? You're always saying we're excited to have these people. We're excited to see these people are feeling passionate about finding God, but there's this other aspect. We need to make sure that there's proper pastoral leadership. And what is going on though? Because we are seeing a lot of people, like, even I was watching Tucker Carlson, and he's been a very a-religious guy, and even he was like, well, I had this really spiritual experience. He said he had a demon sitting on top of him. He didn't know what it was. He had to go to a crazy Christian that he knew to, find out what we asked his crazy Christian producer. He was like, have you ever had this? And it opened his mind to a lot of other things. What do you think is happening here? First of all, do you see what I'm seeing? And what do you think
Oh, yeah.
what is happening?
I totally see what you're seeing. And, the conference that we were both at together in 2018 was run by Justin Brierley, who has a wonderful podcast called The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God. And he's tracing exactly what you're talking about. And the podcast, as well as his book by the same name, discusses the rise and fall of the new atheism. And that's just a fascinating thing. Since 9/11, there was this, really, it was a kind of a publishing phenomenon, and Richard Dawkins was able to write some very spite-filled books that earned him millions, and he owes God a lot of money. And then Christopher Hitchens
A lot
and
more than that.
Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett, and there was this mood, I guess, and all of a sudden, because of 9/11, people were like, oh, religious extremism is the problem, and then let's even just knock off extremism, and let's lump all the religions in together. And apparently, Methodists are as dangerous as Islamists, and let's just kind of take out all our angst on Christianity largely. But that's now in the rearview mirror, and it's really interesting, like what becomes plausible for people, and and so much of it is intangible. That's why people are talking about a vibe shift, even more than like a culture shift, because it's not like different institutions are changing. It's just there's something in the air that is intangible. And so you get somebody like a Joe Rogan, who is, as my friend Paul Vanderklay says, he is the archetypal dude of the cultural zeitgeist. And he is this sort of bellwether of what is going on in the culture. And you look at the sort of things that he was saying 10, 15 years ago, and he was like angry against Christianity, and he just thought every Christian was a moron. And we've put out videos on our channel, just like little compilations of what he used to say about Christianity and now what he's saying about Christianity, and it is night and day. And then my friend Wesley Huff went on to Joe Rogan recently.
That was amazing.
Wasn't that great? Yeah, a 3-hour conversation. And and there were 3 aspects, I think, that Wes got into with Joe Rogan that I think are emblematic of the sorts of conversations that we're going to be having in 2025 and beyond. So, I mean, he starts off by talking about miracles, and like Wes experienced a miracle. He was a paraplegic for a year
Right.
and then walked again. And
I
that
didn't know
really
that.
resonated with Joe. Yeah. Yeah. He had this very rare condition, and just instantaneously, well, after a year of suffering it and being in a wheelchair, just was instantaneously healed, and no muscle atrophy and that kind of thing. And that really, it didn't surprise Joe in one sense, because he doesn't mind the idea of the supernatural. He
Right.
kind of accesses the transcendent through psychedelics and that kind of thing, but he has no problem with the idea of the supernatural. He's not Jordan Peterson. Oh, sorry, he's not Richard Dawkins, right? He has been influenced by Jordan Peterson in lots of ways to think that there are more things in heaven and on earth than I dreamt of in our philosophy. And so he's open to miracles. He was very open to like talking about the place of humanity and the very surprising exceptionalism that humans have on planet Earth. We are not like our the apes. We are not like other members of the animal kingdom, and it's so obvious that we're not. And just the human value and human distinctiveness and human dignity was another really interesting area of conversation that they got into. And then morality, and I think Joe Rogan is just very interested in what works. He's a practical guy, and I think he's surrounded by some Christians who are brilliant witnesses to him, it sounds like. And I think he's noticing that in a culture where community is not working anymore, and where there's so much breakdown, he's noticing that in churches there is embodied, practical, sane, livable humanity that's going on. And I think that is, aside from all the people who are telling him wonderful Christian things like Wes Huff is, and Jordan Peterson preaches to him, even though Jordan himself is not a Christian. But I think even over and above all the Christian preaching that is happening to Joe Rogan, I think if he becomes a Christian in 2025, I think it will be ordinary Christian witness around him. It'll just be the life of the church, I think, that gets through to him. Because when there are storms and when the rest of the world is on sinking sand, well, you want something solid to stand on. And I think the Church of Jesus Christ kind of offers this solid rock. And I think people, if not Joe Rogan himself, I think people like Joe Rogan are flocking to that rock.
I agree. We definitely are seeing, for lack of a better term, I think Gen Z got this one right. Vibe shift. I think we are seeing it, and to see Wes Huff just blatantly, bringing the gospel to Joe Rogan, the biggest podcaster. We had a big thing here in America during the election, Glenn, when Kamala Harris would not go on Joe Rogan, and everybody was like, that's the craziest move ever. He is the most listened to podcaster on planet Earth. I mean, you just couldn't get more ears. And so to have Wes Huff represent the gospel there. Now, Jesus doesn't need Wes He doesn't need Joe Rogan. He doesn't need podcasting. I get that. But it is still an incredible sign of the power of the gospel that there is no wall that will stand against it, even cultural. And I think in the West, it has felt like we have lost that cultural battle. And when we stood so strong for, at one time, at least on the surface, for biblical values and biblical freedom and that type of idea. Um, you mentioned that there are a lot of people like Rogan who are looking for more solid foundation. I definitely see that. I would like to say also, Glenn, what happened to Rogan between then and now is he became a father. And
Mm,
that is something that changes people a lot.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think I'm writing a book now about the holistic nature of politics and how all of these things go together to create a situation where people can't reach God. And
Mm,
one thing is the breakdown of family, right? Because family changes people. When you become a parent, you become a different person. So what do? We tell
mm,
people abort your babies, divorce, abandon your marriages, family is whatever you make it, and then so that's just my observation there.
yeah.
But the other thing I want to say is that I recently wrote an article on my Substack. Y'all can go to my Substack, justkiradavis.substack.com. Go look me up on Twitter at Real Kira Davis. I wrote an article about Denzel Washington. Denzel Washington recently became a pastor in his congregation, Church of Christ, I think, which I have issues with, but whatever. That's besides the point. He became a pastor. Now, he's been in the church forever. He's been a Christian
Mm,
forever. I
mm,
thought, why now is he getting baptized? First of all, he's getting baptized. I think he got rebaptized, and then he got ordained. But the article I wrote, Glenn, and I'd like you to speak to this, was about how I am seeing a lot of people in Hollywood either convert, because I live in California, so I live in Southern California. I live in the entertainment industry, and I work in it
mm,
sometimes. So I see a lot of people are either coming to Christ or they are beginning to come out of the closet, so to speak, to be a bit
yeah.
more bold. And somebody asked the question, why is this happening now? And I said, I don't think it's necessarily because people are feeling sad and realizing their lives are empty and they want the Lord. I do think most of those people know God exists. I do think most of those people know that there is a spiritual realm and they're operating in it in Hollywood, and it's about to come crashing down. I think a lot of people are looking for protection. And
Huh.
if I've learned anything in this 50th year of my life, it's that the loving and kind and um, tolerant and understanding God that I have been learning about my whole life is real. But there's also a powerful, wrathful warrior God who understands we are strangers living in a strange land and who stands between us and the enemy who tells us there is no one to save us. I think a lot of those people are watching the enemy bear down on them. They've given themselves to something they think they can't get out of, and God is the protection they're looking for. Your
Mm.
thoughts? Does that
I
sound
think
crazy?
no, no. And, I mean, and I think it's important to say that because God is love, therefore God is angry at evil. And and like a warrior riding on the storm clouds, will bring about a day of wrath on all evil. But because he is so fiercely and all-consumingly loving, therefore he judges and must do. Because if you are able to look at the evil of this world, and if you're just nonplussed, and if you just sort of smile benignly at the evil of this world, you are a sociopath. Like that would not make you loving. Like if you were to not be angered by evil, it is because God is love, that therefore, yeah, he does judge, and there is evil, and there is a day of reckoning, and all that kind of stuff. And interestingly, in the UK setting, probably I meet as many people now who say, I'm not sure I believe in God, but I do believe in the devil. I meet a lot of people who
Wow.
say that. I'm not sure I believe in goodness with a capital G, but I definitely believe in evil with a capital E. And that idea of protection that you mentioned, I think, is very important. And I think churches need to be ready for it, because the sorts of people that are coming into our churches, and there are people coming into our churches, and I think some of it is to do with the fact that it's just suddenly it's just okay to be looking into your faith. It's suddenly
Yeah.
just okay to order a Bible from Amazon. It's
Yeah.
suddenly just okay to binge Bible Project videos on YouTube. Suddenly it's just okay to go to church. Like literally, like three near neighbors of me, like in my street and on the next street, three since lockdown have just said to their families, right, we're going to church. Um, enough. We
Yeah.
need some wisdom and sanity in our lives. And so like the vibe shift accounts for that. But the sort of people that are coming to church having just ordered a Bible from Amazon are the sort of people who have dabbled in the occult, are the sort of people who have taken psychedelics and it's kind of done a number on them. They are the sort of people who definitely believe in Satan, and they're trying to figure out whether there's God. And so I think that the church needs to be really ready for very thorny pastoral issues, but also some real wrestling with the supernatural too.
And the Western church isn't really ready for it because we
Mm,
have been steeped in this materialism. One of the things that brought me eventually to you and to the Unbelievable conference with Justin Brierley was that, and into his Unbelievable podcast, which he no longer hosts, um, was that apologetics. I love, this is what I do on the show. I do critical thinking on this show.
mm,
Um, uh, and I love that aspect. C.S. Lewis is a big fan, but
mm,
um, the downside of that is that it can get us mired in practicalities and we forget the magic, for lack of a better term, of the kingdom. And
mm,
I don't feel that I've been running into people who I'm 50 now, so I'm Gen X. I'm running into people here in California who have grown up in the occult.
mm,
And I'm running into people, I'm not making this up, everybody. I'm running into people from the music industry who are telling me that occult practices are happen that it's very common. There's not weird. It's not an accident that all of your favorite artists suddenly turn into witches, or like that's
mm,
not a joke. It's not a comic book thing. There's something going on.
mm,
So there, and when you're dealing with the we do not, I guess this is what I'm worried about, Glenn. We don't have a proper, in the West, as Christians, as people of the book, we do not have a proper understanding of the spiritual realm, and we are not prepared for the powerful and dangerous elements that come out of that, and the people who need an actual systematic approach to freeing themselves from the grips
mm,
of occult life. Like that stuff follows you. It follows you in your spirit. You can be cursed. Your family
mm.
can be
Yeah,
cursed.
yeah.
The way you need a doctor to cut out your cancer, you need specialists too to deal with this kind of stuff. I'm worried that the Western church isn't ready for what's about to hit us.
Yeah, and like I was never convinced actually that the way we should have approached even the new atheism was to sort of out apologetic the clever philosophers on the
No,
materialist
you've
side.
always been a poet at heart. Yeah.
Well, yeah, capturing imaginations and that kind of thing. That the strongholds are much stronger than just a philosophy or just bad ideas. That yeah, the heart is gripped by um, that which will kill it. We're addicted to the things that kill us, and the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, and that remains true whether you're talking to a Richard Dawkins. He needs a deliverance too, right?
Amen.
Um, but certainly, my next door neighbor, they've just moved out actually, but my next door neighbor, um, yeah, she's one of those people who would say, I definitely believe in the devil. I'm not sure I believe in God. Her father was a spiritualist minister. Um, and so seances were just a regular part of her life. And it was interesting. She was talking to me about some intractable problems that she had in her life.
Mm.
And she said, I just feel like I'm cursed, you know? And it was interesting because I think 10 years ago, if I was in an evangelistic setting and somebody said, I just feel like I'm cursed, I think I would have done what everybody does in those circumstances. And said, oh, you're fine. You're lovely. You'll
Mm.
catch a break. Don't worry. Things will turn around for you. The sun will come out tomorrow, that kind of thing. Instead, I just said, yeah, do you believe in curses? She said, I think I do. I was like, yeah, I believe in curses too. And
Mhm.
we just pressed into the spiritual side of that, because I think in Adam there is the, there's no spiritual neutrality, there's no spiritual
Right.
Switzerland. And we don't just live in a world of thorns and thistles. We live in a world of domination by an enemy who has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. That's 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4. Like, there, there is a blindness out there, and there are these intractable kind of problems. Praise God, the next verse in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 5 says, we preach not ourselves, but Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake, which is interesting. You've got the proclamation and the life of service in the church that goes on. And then it says, the God who said, let light shine out of darkness, will let his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the gospel of the glory of God in the face of Christ. And so in all this talk about the darkness, wonderfully, she's started reading the Bible, and she's just absolutely thrilled with Jesus. And I think it is important to say that in the proclamation of Christ, the light is stronger than the darkness. And we mustn't have a George Lucas theology, right? In Star Wars, the dark side is probably the equal opposite of the light
Right.
side, which of course is not the way light and darkness works, George. Um, you, there are several light switches in this room. There are no darkness switches, because darkness is not an equal and opposite source to push back against. And so you're absolutely right. We need to take the darkness really seriously. The thief comes to steal and kill and destroy. But I have come that you might have life, and life in all its fullness. And life is stronger than death, and light is stronger than darkness, and love is stronger than disconnection. And we do need that robust conviction in our hearts as well in this moment, I think.
You know what I've been doing, Glenn, lately? And I'm embarrassed to say that it's taken me until my 50th year to do this, but I've been taking the Bible more literally
Mm,
lately.
mm,
And of course, I'm an artist, so the Bible is full of beautiful prose and poetry and imagery that makes me see the wonder of God's grace, plan, and universe. But I it started with giants, right? Like,
mm.
where where are the giants?
Yeah.
Where did they all go? Why do we never talk about the giants in the Bible? And
Right.
then I thought, what if I just really took that seriously? And then I started thinking about things, Glenn, like when God tells us that we have, like, if we had the faith of a mustard seed, we could move mountains. And I think
Mm,
about things like, I hope this doesn't sound too crazy. I don't do this on my show, so this is a new direction on my show if you see me struggling here.
okay.
Um, uh, I look at things like Tesla's idea that there is this unlimited, untappable energy that's sort of free flowing in the universe. And if we understood how to form some receptors to tap into it, we could do things like levitate and
Mm,
levitate objects to build them instead of having to move them with. We could do things like that. What if I took that literally when God says that all even the rocks cry out my name, and then somebody tells me that the earth has an energy pulse, that you can measure the energy of a rock, that they do actually give you an energy readout. It makes me wonder, yeah, if I understood the mechanics more clearly of God's working, maybe I literally could move mountains. Maybe I literally
mm,
could look at a mountain and move it. I'm thinking about COVID and how we've been so disconnected from the mechanics of our body and how we heal ourselves and what God has provided in our bodies to help us survive. Can't beat death. Only one person did that. But
mm,
there's actually a lot. He's given us a lot to heal ourselves. He says it. He says it in Matthew, right? He says, why are you worrying? I give the birds everything they need. You don't think what if I took that literally? Even right
mm,
now, inside of my body, I have everything I need to make myself well, to make myself a part of my community, to make myself, um, open to God's grace, like all of these things. I just feel we've been so disconnected from that
Yeah.
I've been taking things more literally, Glenn, and I've been doing it in everything. I don't think Western Christians have a concept of how powerful the soul is and why there's
Mm,
a, a universal battle over
yeah.
all of time for it.
Yeah. Well, I think in the last 300 years, probably the last 400 years, certainly since the scientific revolution, we've looked at, oh, Newton was able to explain gravity and the orbits of the planets, and like maybe the universe is just a machine. And even though science was this absolute gift of Christianity to the world, it was Christian scientists at Christian universities studying the natural world according to Christian assumptions about natural philosophy. They, because they believe that humans are the sorts of creatures who can fathom the mysteries of the cosmos, because they had that incredibly spiritual view of what humans are. Like, isn't it amazing to think that Homo sapiens are able to fathom the depths of the cosmos? Like that was it was an incredibly spiritual undergirding to modern science, which has now been kind of forgotten, and we feel like, okay, well, we don't need Christians and Christian universities with Christian assumptions to do it. Science just works. And Newton kind of explained that we're just living in this grand machine, and it's like, and for the next couple of 100 years, we sort of thought, okay, there's probably a double-decker universe, and on the lower ground floor of the universe, it's just a factory space, and we pull the levers, and mechanically the conveyor belts runs, and that's the way the world really works. And if you are so inclined, you can go up to the second floor, where all the spiritual faith heads exist, and they believe in their woo and their nonsense. But we all know, really, that the real world is basically mechanical. Now, you trace that through, into modern times, and one of the things that happens is that science hits the buffers, because now, how do you explain consciousness? How do you explain the person in terms of mechanics? And if you try to take that seriously, like, you will want to kill yourself. Like, you're just a machine in a
Yeah.
machine-like world, and no wonder we've got a meaning crisis. And then you might think, oh, I know what you need to do. You need to just jump up to the second floor, maybe take some ayahuasca, maybe just, psychedelics will open you up to a spiritual side. And like, no, well, that probably takes you some bad places. We need to rethink. It's not a double-decker universe, and there's faith stuff upstairs if you're a faith head, and the rest of the world is just a machine. No, we live in your Father's house. And Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, just the idea that not a sparrow falls to the ground without your Father knowing it. And like you say, the stones crying out, or the Psalms talk about the trees clapping their hands, and stars are worshiping, and all this kind of stuff. And like Eustace in which one of the Narnia books, Eustace like ends up talking to a star, like the stars are people, right? And Eustace says, um, in our world on Earth, stars are just balls of gas. And then the person he's speaking to says, even in your world, balls of gas is what they might be made of, but that is not what they are. And I think that was a brilliant kind of line from Lewis to kind of say, we have been so deceived into
Yeah.
thinking everything is just matter in motion, when we're living in our Father's house, in which the stones would cry out, if only we had ears to hear, if only we could see. The heavens are declaring the glory of God, the skies are proclaiming the works of his hands. We're living in the theater of God's glory, minute by minute, hour by hour. And we just need to, like, the crazy thing is just materialism. That's the crazy thing,
Right.
because
Right.
of
That's
course you're a
crazy.
soul. Of course you're a soul. The most obvious thing about you is that you're a soul. Like, this table here, you might say that's the most real thing because, listen, I just tapped on it. No, you just experienced the sound of my tapping on the table, and you are having a response. And I, through reason and rhetoric and emotion and language and communication, are communicating with you another mind. And it's like mind is communicating with mind via all these immaterial means. The last thing you should be as a materialist, the very last thing. And yet it is just so dominant. So it's not as though materialism is not spiritual. It is the greatest spiritual stronghold in the West, and it's a
Mm.
profoundly spiritual captivity that blinds our minds to what is really there. And what is really there is a profoundly spiritual reality.
So good. I could keep you forever. I promised not to because
Mm.
you have other things to do and apparently have a family to support or whatever. But
Well,
I but I yeah, I do think I want to close out our discussion. Well, I have our fun questions, but I do want to just invite you to drill down a little more on the idea of clarity, of people getting clarity, because I think it's very interesting. I had on last week, I had on Mark Gober, who wrote a book called The Upside Down Mind, and he talks a lot about how, yes, most human communication is not material and how we need,
mm,
but it is ridiculous to assume we are just material and nothing else. He talked about how, when CIA spies are going into training, when they're trained when they're surveilling not to stare directly at a person because a person will feel that they're being stared at. Right?
right,
That's
right,
like
right.
there are all kinds of things flying around out there, people that we have been. I think we used to understand, at least in the West, and we don't. So, Glenn, as we move forward with this vibe shift and it's shifting every day, who knows where it's going to be next week by the time this podcast comes out. But I do feel that one thing that's going on is people are looking for clarity. There's strange things afoot, weird things in the skies, weird weather, weird leaders, weird culture things. People are becoming more aware that there are bad things out there, maybe less aware that there's good things out there. It does feel like we are at a turning point in global culture right now. And that's always the best time for a Jesus moment. But
Hmm.
how do you see your mission at Speak Life, but even more so the Christian church in general, our mission as the world keeps spinning? I think we're going to see a lot more spiritual things become reality to us in the coming 2 to 4 years, and it's going to cause a lot of people confusion. What is your message to people?
On our YouTube channel, I usually start videos by saying, I'm Glenn from Speak Life. We like to see all things through the lens of Jesus. And so we believe that Jesus is the mediator and the one who makes sense of heaven and earth. And he is the integration of heaven and earth. He is the integration of the spiritual and the physical. He is the word who was made flesh. Um, you know, when you come to him, you come to the purest picture of God. He is the most divine thing you've ever seen as he walks around planet Earth, just like overflowing with love. He's also the most human person you've ever seen. As you see his towering personality and his stooping love, he is the integration point, and he is what will make us sane. He is the anchor. The book of Hebrews calls him, you know, he's gone from earth to heaven as our brother and great high priest to kind of anchor us to our true home in heaven. And I think in a world that feels like it's entirely storm tossed, is there an anchor? Yeah, his name is Jesus, and every day people are finding sanity and healing and wholeness and a center in the midst of the storm. I think what people are noticing when they do come to church, no matter what their backgrounds are, whether they've been captive to materialism or whether they've been captive to spiritualism and seances, they are finding in Jesus like a steadiness and a wisdom for life and a sanity in the embodied life of the church. And even though it's scary out there, I think churches are and will be these places of refuge for people who are tired of the culture wars and the unforgiveness of the culture wars. They are hungry for meaning because of the meaning crisis. They are utterly burned out and discarded and twisted through spiritualism and experiences with the demonic, experiences with drugs and that kind of thing. And I think the church is always coming into its own when it is a hospital for sick sinners, when it is a place of refuge for those on the outside of things. So it's not going to be neat. Um, but I think I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful. People don't flee to the rock when they don't experience the storm. When they don't feel like there's a storm, people are happy building on sand. So, to some degree, we can thank God for the storm because at least it's revealing the foundations. And Jesus is good and can be trusted, and he will see us through.
Isn't that amazing that we have a God we can thank for the storms? Like, we don't have to
Wow.
curse him for the storms. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
amazing. I don't know. I
Yeah.
was just thinking about. Okay, well, thank you, Glenn. Well, before we go, I like to ask my guests a couple of fun questions, just to, I don't know, just to entertain me. I guess that's what you're here for. First of all, I would like to ask. I would like to propose. You are the Emperor of America. Let's just say
Okay.
by some miracle, we've been talking about miracles today, Glenn. Let's
Yep.
just say by some miracle, you are the Emperor of America, but you can only do one thing. Then your emperorship is gone. You got to go back to your regular life. You can enact one law or do one thing, change one thing about America. What is it?
I'm going to enforce the playing of cricket for the entire nation. We're going to teach you a true civilizing game called cricket. You say that baseball is played at the speed of life. No, no. You want a sport that will really teach you patience? Play for 5 days, and you still might not get a result. This is what would be good for you. You're so pragmatic, you Americans. Okay,
Oh,
you're
boy.
so instant gratification. You need this. I know you don't think you need this, but I am a benevolent dictator, and I am imposing cricket on you. You're welcome.
Wow, that was by far the most diabolical order I have received so far. Some people say that they would, make it illegal to double park or something. But I thought it was a good one. Okay, I'm Canadian by birth, and
Huh.
grew up in the Commonwealth, and so we did play cricket in PE class and gym class.
Oh,
And I remember it being pretty exciting, and then becoming an adult and watching it and going, this wasn't nearly as fun as I remember it being in school.
your
I don't know.
formation is not yet complete, Kira. You just keep going. Keep
All right.
like.
Well, this is America, and if we can make money off it, we will. So who knows? Cricket will come here. All right. And
It's the
last
second
question.
most watched sport in the world after
Well,
after after
right.
soccer. Yeah.
Right, which is another thing that we don't really care about. But America has too much. I think this is the thing, right? We got too much going on. There's too many things to focus on, as opposed to being
Yeah.
from the Netherlands, where your skiers are your big
So
superstars.
you'll just call it the World Series, even though, like, Toronto gets to play, so it's the
That's
World
right.
Series anyway.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. We just renamed the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
I'm
This
so
is who
surprised
we
it wasn't
are.
called the Gulf of America. Just-
Believe me, I believe there were some proposals for that. um, let's get into books though before I let you go. What
Hmm.
is a book outside of the Bible that influenced you or had a big impact on your life?
I'm gonna name my wife's book called A New Name. It's her memoir really about struggles with anorexia as a child, and then again in early adult life. And it's actually like I'm an evangelist, so I'm always talking to people from outside the faith, and it's the number one book that I actually recommend to people because she talks about the darkness of that addiction in a way that like you can really feel what she feels and you can understand the grip that it has on her. But then when Jesus shows up towards the end of the book, he shines up like he turns up like light in a dark place, and it's an absolutely beautiful book. And we lived through some of it.
Mm.
And so it's more than a book to me, but it's probably the number one book I recommend to people if they want to feel what Christianity really is, rather than just I can I write books where people can sort of think it through, but Emma has written a book where people really feel how Jesus comes into the darkest valley.
What's the name of the book again, Glenn?
A New Name.
A New Name by Emma. Is she Scrivener?
Scrivener, yeah, she's Scrivener.
Yeah, Scrivener.
Yeah. Which means
by
writer. Yeah, the name
Oh,
Scrivener
okay.
means writer. So I always tell her, however good your book is, I made you a writer.
Ah. Or she just fulfilled her original purpose of making
That's
you
it.
feel like you made someone a writer. Glenn, it's been a real joy talking to you, and I recommend everyone go. I think the best place to start always is just go follow his X account. Go Speak Life UK, or you can just go to Speak Life. They all connect. Look up Glenn on YouTube as well. But I feel very strongly, Glenn, that Aslan is on the move. And so I think it is time for those of us who have a voice and who are plugged into the kingdom. I operate in the political space, but I think we should always be speaking Christ, because I think weird times are coming. I feel very strongly about that. What we would say is weird. So I thank you for just taking the time to remind us that there is a hope that is truly miraculous. Tell us, Glenn, more about where people can find you and what you're doing out there.
Yeah, so look us up on YouTube with Speak Life or Speak Life Media. You'll find the channel, and if people go to speaklife.org.uk, they'll find all the different links. There's one free resource that people might be interested in, 321course.com, and it's my attempt to sort of boil down Christianity in a way that I hope refreshes Christians, but also for those leaning in on the outside. If you've been listening in and thinking, okay, I might be interested in finding out more about this Jesus, it assumes no prior knowledge. Yeah, you can binge it in a couple of hours, or you can do it in 8 sessions, but go to 321course.com and it's free.
Sold. I like the price and the topic. All right, Glenn. Well, God bless you. Thank you so much. Everybody, don't forget, please share this podcast, like it, subscribe. Those are all the easy, free ways you can help support people like Glenn and myself. Subscribe to me on Substack, justkiradavis.substack.com. Go to Twitter at @RealKiraDavis. And don't forget, every once in a while, just stop and listen to yourself.
I pray the Lord my soul to take, that we won't lose faith and we won't lose faith. All we got is us, no one can take that away. So don't lose faith, it's gonna be okay. I pray the Lord my soul to take, that we won't lose faith and we won't lose faith. All we got is us, no one can take that away. So don't lose